Hello?
Howdy.
How is my mic quality?
Your mic quality sounds good. How you doing?
Not the best place right now. A lot of interpersonal life stuff happening with me.
Oh,
Um,
well, hopefully we won't add to the stress levels too much by arguing on this irrelevant and extremely heated subject.
right. Well, mostly for me, like all debate, it's mostly just sport, and I'm just here to have fun, really. At least for myself, maybe just to distract myself from how horrendous life is right now.
Oh,
I saw you watch a video on stream that is an example of this horrendousness that happens. Can I ask you a question?
sure. What's up?
All right. Do you think trans people get more vitriol from strangers or people they're related to?
Um, Probably people they're related to. Like it would be if not every trans person gets vitriol from people they're related to, but if they do, it would be many times worse than from strangers.
Yes. And well, why do you think that is?
Well, anything that involves like emotional degradation is going to be a lot more interpersonally damaging if you know the person and if you value their opinion.
It's it that is true, but it's a little bit more than that. If it's like a public setting and if someone's being vitriolic, I have the ability to escape. But when it's like interpersonal, it can feel like it's at home, in which case it feels like you're in a prison that you can't do anything about it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, that
go ahead.
tracks. I'm lucky to have had supportive parents. By the way, what name should my audience call you by and pronouns?
Oh, yeah, sorry, I totally forgot about that. I apologize. My name is Romo Fett. You can call me Nikki, or I also have she/her pronouns. I am a slutty furry squirrel.
Those two tend to go together.
Hmm.
Okay, so you emailed me because you disagreed with me on the Hogwarts Legacy stuff. What
Hmm.
did you disagree with?
Well, so the first thing that I disagree with, which is the least important, is, and I'm sure you've heard this before, is your vitriol with it. I'm not here to necessarily tone police you. But I will ask, is like a lot of your like um, hatred on this topic, especially towards like other like people who are for the boycott, is this performative for your like is for your show,
No,
for your live show?
the frustration's sincere. I just feel like it's a really like kind of obvious topic in a lot of ways, and it's very frustrating that the left keeps tripping over itself like over and over and over again when it comes to basic optic stuff. It's always the same issue. It's always about purity testing, and like everything that has to do with an opportunity to purity test ends up being like an opportunity to trip over yourself again and again and again and again. So I get increasingly frustrated with time over this, but you know.
Hmm. Well, specifically, you were telling like certain trans people to unfollow you. Um, that video that you just uploaded with about Hassan. Do you believe in that wholeheartedly, or again, is this just like hyperbolic?
When did I say what did I say they should unfollow me for?
Oh, because they were talking about how like they were not understanding where you were coming from, or not understanding that like how do I explain this? They it was someone saying you can make money playing a different game. You can do a stream, like a charity stream, playing a different game, and you're like, that's not the point of this. You told that person to unfollow you.
Yeah, probably. I mean, that seems like the kind of mean thing that I would say to somebody in chat who I disagree with. They can if they want to, obviously. I'm usually pretty um hyperbolic when I'm giving shit to chat. Though obviously if they want to unfollow me for my takes, that is always on the table, you know. Um
Right.
I the well, I think it was because they said something like, "Why don't you just play another game?" So I was like, "Why
Hmm.
don't you just watch another streamer or something?" It felt like it was kind of it was like an easy follow through to that point.
Sure, sure. Um, and then like obviously the vitriol towards not I wouldn't necessarily call it vitriol, but just like how you handled it with Jesse Gender. Do you believe the things that you said about her or about her particular position on this?
That it was retarded?
Uh, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So have you ever heard of a book called Transgender Marxism?
That does sound familiar. I don't know if it's just because I've heard the two words in tandem so often. I think I've heard of it.
Right. It's actually a book that I know Jesse Gender has read. I've also read this book myself, and there are some things that I've taken away from it. Have you heard of the term social reproduction theory?
Yes. Yes, I've heard of that.
All right. Actually, you know what? Well, okay. Do you want to describe to me what social reproduction theory is, or do you want to describe?
Oh no, I've just
what...
heard the term. I don't know. I couldn't use it in a sentence. I've just heard it.
All right. Well, so social reproduction theory is a Marxist feminist term. At least that's where it originated from. It's basically a lot of the unpaid labor that is used to facilitate paid labor, right? So this is stuff like people need emotional connections. They need, like, if you were to send a man out to work, like 16-hour days, have them come home, sleep for like 3 hours, go back out for another 16 hours, they're not going to be in a good space. You know what I mean? Like, who's going to make their food? Who's going to do their laundry? Who's all these different things, all these different necessities that help perpetuate capital, help perpetuate profit, help perpetuate labor. And all of this is essentially unpaid.
Gotcha, that makes sense.
But necessary.
So it would be a reference to any kind of labor that exists necessarily to maintain the status quo and facilitate the reproduction of capital that doesn't get treated like regular labor because it doesn't fit into the traditional, like, labor selling, wage rewarding metric that we use to describe, like, labor traditionally.
Exactly. You know, it's all the thing, like, and I guess this stuff is necessary. Like, love and affection is necessary. Maybe not to some people, but like, this is how we reproduce as a society. So the reason I bring that up is because when I'm going to be using the term social reproduction, I'm not talking about.
Gotcha. Yeah, that tracks, and I won't interpret it in that fashion. But what, may I ask, does this have to do with Jesse Gender or anything pertaining to the Hogwarts Legacy boycott?
Right. So in this book, Transgender Marxism, there was this usage, because they bring up the term social reproduction theory a lot. And this is also useful for trans people. So trans people use a lot of social reproduction in our own communities because, well, it's not always impossible for trans people to reproduce, but it's much harder than a cis couple. So a lot of it has to do with forms of bonding, forms of like affection, forms of just being there for each other. Sorry, I had to get some water.
Gotcha.
Now that we've discussed how like a lot of trans people use social reproduction, I wanted to ask, what do you think necessarily the goal for trans people was to boycott Hogwarts Legacy?
Their goal is probably to deprive it of attention and of revenue as a way of indicating a lack of public support for the positions held by J.K. Rowling.
Okay. If that's your earnest belief, then I could definitely see how a boycott like this would be completely ineffectual. And
wait, then what do you think its actual purpose was?
Well, yes, because I disagree with that purpose. You know what I mean? I don't think that, like, that would have to assume that trans people think that we're dumb enough to actually believe Harry Potter as a franchise, as this huge franchise where millions of dollars is pumped into it, is going to be stopped by our like meager, contributions. It's not about that. It's about it. This is about, it's for other trans people. It's not about any cis person. It's not about depriving J.K. Rowling her money. She's rich enough. She'll die rich. You know what I mean? It's not about that.
I've definitely seen people saying it. It's specifically about that. I mean, boycotts are traditionally for that purpose, to deny attention and money to the product or the company that they're talking. What other possible purpose could a boycott be for?
Well, so it's one of the same things that you did your whole supporting Biden thing over. So early on, when you were talking about how one of the reasons you support Biden is to reveal the ineffectual nature of the American democratic system. Is that correct, or am I misinterpreting?
Well, I thought Biden should win over Trump, and I think the left should care about electoral politics for sure.
Do you think electoral politics will be the way towards socialism?
They're a necessary component of winning the public support that would allow us to build socialism. Even if it's not the mechanism by which it is actually built, it's still a part of the PR process.
PR process. All right. But it could also be a part of the PR process by people seeing that this system is going to, like, it's not going to kill itself, and it won't fail inward unless through like some mistake that it does or some unforeseen consequence of a certain action they do. A lot of it is going to be like, hey, I no longer trust the system. We need to build more horizontal structures instead of like lateral structures.
Yeah, but that doesn't have anything to do with a deficiency in other approaches. It's still necessary to participate in those. I still don't understand what other purpose there could be to boycotting Hogwarts Legacy that doesn't involve an effort to deprive J.K. Rowling of public support and of wealth.
Right. Well, okay. So a lot of this argument hinged on the idea that like, I guess I'll just jump into it. So the reason that trans people are doing this is to allow us, like, or to show us ourselves as a trans community how powerful we are in society, how much leeway cis people or generally the social consciousness is going to let us prosper.
Well, I don't think. I mean, that power would be demonstrated in your ability to deprive them of attention and sales, right? I mean, the only mechanism by which you could demonstrate power through a boycott would be through the other objective of a boycott, which would be to deprive it of wealth and of sales.
Well, yeah. So I want you to imagine a world where, imagine if we lived in a world where this boycott worked. How much better do you think trans people in this world would be?
I mean, it's a fanciful possibility, but it didn't happen, and it can't happen. There's no reasonable way a boycott can function in this way. If the trans community could somehow magically do that, that'd be great. But boycotts don't work at all. The entire right wing wasn't able to meaningfully boycott Nike or Gillette, and they're far more powerful and wealthy and influential than just the trans community or whatever subset of it cares about Hogwarts Legacy.
Right. Well, disregard their movements because I'm not interested in reproducing their movements. I'm saying in a world where this gets like huge traction and it actually like does hurt the numbers of this company, it would behoove like the Hogwarts brand to try to separate as far away from J.K. Rowling as possible, or as far away from any other form of trans bigotry.
But that didn't happen, which is my criticism. Like, I don't think
it doesn't happen. Yes.
Right. So that would be my criticism. It's why I would say this is kind of like retarded, the broader like boycott Hogwarts Legacy attitude, because we're talking about something that can't really happen. You know, we're rooting ourselves in a very naive understanding of how boycotts function.
Well, I think we're trying to get out certain naivetes of trans people, like for trans people in and of themselves. So right now, especially like in the Western world, I will admit I am part of the Western world. There has been a rise of hatred and a rise of like not bigot. Well, yeah, there's been a rise of destruction and hatred and tearing down of trans people. We see it in bills. We see it like, everywhere. You know what I mean? Like that video you were just watching on stream.
Yeah, I agree. But this is why I would say it's even more important that we be intelligent when it comes to political strategy.
Well, I think this was a pretty intelligent political strategy, especially for people, like especially for like trans people who need. Maybe let me circle back around when I talked about how trans people they get more vitriol, they get more hatred at their home than they do in public. Well, maybe not more, but it definitely hurts more because that's our home. We need a place to live, to survive. And when we can't feel that way, we need each other. We need it. I like the other day, like literally 2 days ago, I was literally thinking about hopping onto a bus and not stopping until I didn't know where I was because my mom was just being like horrendously transphobic.
But how does I don't understand the relationship here.
Mm-hmm.
If you're doing something politically ineffective, it seems to me like the fact that trans people are already so marginalized means it would be even more harmful. Like right now, trans people are in a very precarious situation, which means it seems like we should be much more careful with our politics here. We have to be a lot more strategic. We have to be a lot more forward thinking, as opposed to other issues that aren't as immediately on the table. Like, for example, I don't know, black people in the United States. Race relations aren't exactly good right now, but they're not facing this overwhelming tide of impending genocide like trans people are. So when it comes to like strategies for racial progressivism, I think that I'm more forgiving, I guess, of what I perceive to be bad strategy because it feels like there's a bit more room to feel things out. I don't think that's the case with trans people right now, which is why it's very frustrating when I see them doing stuff that looks like it has no chance of working and actively like making it worse for themselves.
Well, do you think that if we had any do you think if we engaged in quote unquote good strategies that would change the attitudes of the people who want to genocide us?
Yes.
You do?
Yeah, definitionally. Not all of them, but yeah, the better the strategy, the better the outcome. And one of the most desirable outcomes is moving people over.
I would probably personally disagree with that because it's not necessarily about the argument. It's about our identity in and of itself.
No, it's not.
Our identity. Go ahead.
Your identity doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is how many people agree with your identity. And insofar as getting people to agree with you, the better you strategize, the more likely you are to be able to win people over. I mean, it's necessary to do that, right? Like we've seen the difference between good and bad advocacy when it comes to social movements. And the more people are convinced, the less you have to individually defend your identity. You have a social majority on your side with good strategy.
Well, these things are institutionalized. And again, like I said, systems they will not kill themselves. And this is one of the reasons we're getting pushed back in the first place is quote unquote transgenderism or gender ideology. It threatens modernity. It threatens cis normativity. It threatens capitalism.
I disagree.
You know what I mean?
I don't think it threatens capitalism, for one. And for two, we've seen a huge change in how much trans acceptance there is in the past 30 years. 30 years ago, nobody even knew what transgender meant. They knew the words transvestite and homosexual. Now, more than 50% of Americans support transgenders people, the ability to determine their own gender, blah, blah, basic support for trans rights. People can change their mind on this stuff. If you're making the argument that like systemic biases are immovable and unchangeable and a fact of the world, then you're kind of giving yourself up to bad strategy, because you're essentially saying there's no possibility of a good outcome to begin with. But I think that's a self-destructive attitude.
Well, okay, so with, and I will agree with you on one thing, that like trans visibility has done a lot to help grow our, like, to grow our community. Again, I'm talking about social reproduction theory. A lot of this has been done by trans people and very powerful trans allies. How this doesn't work is when we are told to expose ourselves, and make ourselves feel and act weaker than we actually are. And that's one of the cases with this whole controversy in and of itself. This whole controversy is us actually like revealing how much power we truly have.
None?
That trans people can't even get people to not pay $60 to buy a game.
Yeah, of course not. Boycotts don't work. That was never going to work. It seems kind of ineffective to me to publicly demonstrate the complete inability of the trans community to achieve a stated goal. It makes the trans community look weak, and moreover, it makes them look unpopular. It makes them look hysterical, like they're whining about something nobody else actually cares about. That's one of the reasons why I generally think boycotts are pretty laughable. Think of how much we laughed when the right wing ineptly tried to cancel Nike after the Colin Kaepernick deal, right? They weren't able to, because of course they couldn't. It's Nike. You can't boycott Nike. You can't boycott Nesquik or Coca-Cola. You can't boycott Gillette. But when right-wingers try, it's funny to us because they're going to fail, and it's funny when they fail. And that's how people feel right now about trans people, because they made the same blunder. They did this run into. They tripped right over this same mistake, you know. And we've seen the consequences. It's gotten huge numbers on Twitch. They made, and by they I mean trans people and their allies, made Hogwarts Legacy trend for months before its release on social media about how people shouldn't play it, and so on and so forth. And infighting happened after it did get released, where trans people and their allies started arguing with people like Hassan Piker. No, you can't play it, even if the reason you were going to play it was to have a trans charity fundraising stream. And that infighting makes the left look really bad. It makes the trans community look like a whiny, hysterical subsection of a broader political movement. Makes the left look weak. It just seems like a bad idea overall.
Well, I think that like in a world where trans people aren't even allowed to have like a voice in this like engage like in this you know what I'm trying to say. I would much rather live in a world where trans people try to utilize their power in order to find outcomes that they view as desirable, and I will get into what we actually desired in that transaction, versus a world where we are kept quiet. I feel like this game would have just done just as well if trans people did not even have a peep of word about it, and you would still have like the right wing being like, oh look, this transphobic creator is still selling really well. Like they would have made the talking points anyway if we were not speaking at all.
I think that's a defeatist attitude. You're essentially absolving yourself of any responsibility for political effectiveness, and I disagree. I agree that the right would have tried. I agree the numbers still would have been high, but I think things were worsened because of the whole boycott shenanigan nonsense. And I think that if you want to frame that as like the trans community staying quiet, then I think they should stay quiet, yeah. If them speaking out causes them to materially lose favor in public discourse, then it is the wrong move to speak out there. All forms of political engagement, all kinds of political discourse, they're about choosing when to pick your battles, right? I mean, that's been the case forever. All social movements are about this to some extent or another. So it makes sense then that at some points, like say, for example, when an ultra popular, massive AAA game is about to release, it might be a really bad time to try to tie the perceived popularity of trans rights to, say, the failure of that game to sell well. That is, that's a really difficult sell.
Well, this isn't necessarily for like, again, I'm not like, I don't care about like the cis people in this situation. Not that I don't care about cis people, but this situation is for trans people. And as a trans person, it allows people to see, hey, who was not willing to do this for us. Do you kind of get what I mean?
Yeah, I just don't care. What you're essentially saying is it's okay to do politically ineffective things if we get to have it as like a moral like virtue signal or like a gatekeep we can use to determine who's quote really on our side. And it's not true. You can be really on trans people's side. Um, and you can play Hogwarts Legacy with like a trans fundraising stream, or you can play it and make fun of it the whole time. It doesn't make you any less on trans people's side. But that purity testing stuff does cause a lot of infighting, as we're seeing right now, and I think that's really destructive.
Well, so trans people, like, especially like what I was talking about earlier about my situation, I felt like really trapped inside my house, and I really didn't have anybody else to call upon. Like, we just don't need allies. We need strong allies at the moment. We need people who can like take in trans people off the streets without a job. That's what we need.
I don't see what that has to do with this particular subject, though. You know, we could have had Hassan Piker getting probably around 60 or 70,000 viewers streaming it with a trans charity fund pinned in the corner while the chat ruthlessly made fun of British people, J.K. Rowling, and transphobia in general in the corner. It could have been dozens of hours of high-quality fundraiser content alongside ruthless political partisanship in your favor. I don't think that it would have made... I don't think that would have been cheapened in any way just because they're playing Hogwarts Legacy. That would have been like the central point.
Yeah. Well, no one really gets to like pick or choose. Like, this is like this is built upon a social consciousness. No one really gets to pick or choose how certain things are like effective. I would almost declare that as like a nirvana fallacy of sorts.
Do you think what I just said wouldn't be good? The thing that I just described?
For a trans charity?
With what I just said with Hassan. It would also probably win some normies over because it would be a big game that just released. And that way, a lot of people who just want to see Hogwarts Legacy content would see Hassan streaming it. They would go there and they'd see all this like pro-trans stuff in Hassan's chat, which would probably be a lot better than going over to like a normie gamers chat and not having any kind of adjacent political commentary.
Well, I guess that's possible, but this is not what we've asked for. Like, this isn't what we asked for as like as a people.
But who cares?
Can I ask?
No, but you have to make a good argument for it. You can't just say it's okay, like you should do a thing just because the trans community asks. The trans community is full of, I hate them, people. I've noticed that people tend to make bad decisions. I don't think it's right to go like, okay, well, maybe this wouldn't be politically effective, but you still have to do this politically ineffective thing because we've told you to, you know?
Real quick, I noticed Beyond Safe Word was in your chat, and I just want to say hello, Beyond Safe Word. We love you.
Don't look at chat. It's a classic mistake when you're talking to a live streamer. But also hi to them as well, of course. But you understand what I'm talking about, right? It's just about political effectiveness. If trans people are like really intent on the idea that they don't want to see the game, hear about the game, they kept talking about it, so clearly they want to hear about it, but they don't want to see people playing the game. They have to just go watch some, I don't know, some fucking Celeste live stream, like what
I'm talking to you about it right now, aren't I?
Yeah, that's true. Just don't like if it's politically effective to use the game's popularity as a springboard for pro-trans discussion. That seems to me like it's the objectively right move to make. I don't know what possible argument there could be to not do that.
Well, let me ask you a question. Do you believe in Black only spaces?
I don't like them that much. No, I mean they're fine. I am for the most part. No, I tend not to like them. Yeah.
No. So like, would you go out of your way to intrude upon a Black only space if Black people said, hey, for this one day, can we please just have this one space?
Well, I probably wouldn't make a point of being a dick under those specific circumstances, if for no other reason than because I don't think I'd get much out of being in that space under those circumstances anyway. But I don't see what this has to do with the Hogwarts Legacy discussion. That would imply that like all the internet is trans people's personal space.
Not necessarily. This is just about, again, this whole strategy is about us as trans people visualize, because again, like I told, like it was never going to work, obviously. This is about us trans people visualizing that on a on this social level, on this conscious level, so that we know how to better engage with ourselves in our own communities.
What you're talking about is the definition of virtue signaling, though. You're saying what you're explicitly saying, this is politically ineffective, but I want this to be done anyway because I'm arbitrarily designating this as a marker of good virtue. So I want people to do it for that reason.
Sure. Everyone does this though. Would you not agree on that? Like everybody has like this concept of this is another form of social reproduction.
But if it
as
involves
I like to talk about
politically ineffective actions, then no, I don't think everyone does that. I think.
Well, no, this just involves all action in like period. There are certain behaviors that we find in other people that will make us potentially more or less comfortable with them. Everybody does this. It's impossible not to do this. This is like an animal being like friendly. Oh, not friendly, and run away.
Yeah, but if we're humans, we have the capacity for thought and strategy. And if the line that's being drawn is one which is going to harm the optics of the trans community and is politically ineffective, we shouldn't do it. Like, we're not thoughtless animals here, you know. If trans people are interpersonally uncomfortable with, like, seeing people play Hogwarts Legacy, I don't care about their comfort. They're not my friends. What I care about is the political well-being of the trans community broadly. And that, I think, is something that no individual trans person, or even the community, has the right to sacrifice for the benefit of their personal emotional comfort. Because if we go down that road, then it's like, you know, okay, like, fuck political strategy altogether. Let's just wait out the apocalypse and, I don't know, play board games or Gartic Phone. It's like almost political nihilism. You're not even trying anymore.
Well, there's potentially different strategies, and also, I like so there's so your side of leftism. I personally, just because I like to get a rise out of you, I actually call it loser leftism. If you want to call it something more optimistic, we can call it survival leftism. But again, I'm just trying to get a rise out of you. But this basic idea that like the left is on the losing battle and the left is it needs to like, and I'm sure you agree with this, like you don't think leftism is going to happen within our lifetimes. You just want the left to quote unquote survive, correct?
I want us to do whatever seems at that time to be the most politically effective thing possible. If there is no avenue for building socialism at any given point, you work to convince people and to increase the likelihood of your movement surviving. It's just basic survival. Survival can involve flourishing as well, obviously, when you have the resources to do so. But you need to be prescient enough to know when that time is.
Do you always think that the ends justify the means?
Yes.
Always?
Yeah, that's utilitarianism. I have to believe that.
Really?
Yeah.
See, I guess that's where I would necessarily disagree, and this is one of the reasons I don't particularly subscribe to your form of leftism. Just to get a rise out of you, loser leftism. I'll call it survival leftism. I don't necessarily think that like engaging in certain strategies in order to survive is always amicable. Like again, I'm gonna do a debate bro thing and come up with an insane hypothetical. Are you prepared?
Sure.
All right, let's say that an asteroid hit the Earth, and the only way humans would survive is if we round up all the women, all like anyone who with a womb, and just like turn them into brood mares. At that point, I think the death of the species would be more important than actually preserving the life of humans.
Well, depending on your axiomatic priors, you could make a utilitarian argument for letting the species die. It really depends on what your priors are and how well you think you can actually achieve them. But I don't think there's any hole in utilitarianism. You could theoretically arrive at a bunch of different conclusions depending on how you arbitrarily weight the different factors involved. If you don't care at all about the suffering of women, then obviously you would make them broodmares. But if you cared so much about them that you didn't even want to attempt to save the species, then you could, in a utilitarian fashion, justify letting us all die. I don't see what this has to do with not throwing a fuss about the Hogwarts legacy business, though.
Right. Let's try to stay on topic. Even though this is probably like very deep, like rooted in our this is deeply why we contrast on this position. My thought is I'm fine with people living their life. Hey, c'est la vie. You do what you want to do. Obviously, like if you want to play this game, I'm not gonna like actively try to stop you. I know some people like on Twitter or other places are like really venting really hard. I'm not gonna take my time to like put them down either. They're obviously hurting. I don't need tepid support. I need people that would like take me in if anything bad happened in my real life. You know what I mean? And so who do you think is going to be more likely to take a person in? A person who is willing to give up this little creature comfort, or somebody who's not willing to give up this creature comfort?
I don't think there's any relationship between the things you're describing. Somebody who would be willing to give up ketchup because you told them to might well be more willing to take you in if you were homeless, because they're the kind of person who would give up ketchup for you. But that doesn't mean you were justified in asking they give up ketchup as a precondition of your relationship with them. Like, what you're really testing right now is subservience, which comes across as a little bit weird to me. See, being a good trans ally doesn't have anything to do with being nice to trans people or heeding their wishes, because trans people are people, and people have a bunch of random wishes that very often don't coincide with the broader interests of the group. You can be a cold, callous asshole who has no trans friends and still be an excellent ally to the trans community. And one of the best ways you can do that is by being broadly politically effective. See, you wouldn't be so afraid of homelessness if we lived in a system that was more caring towards you. And that systemic change can only come about if we have enough people on our side that we're able to make those changes, right? And that's why I think it's so necessary that we drop the interpersonal feels coddling and we focus broadly on stuff that improves the situation for people all around.
Well, yeah, so like in our current position, like I said, I don't need like tepid support. Because I generally agree with you. I think that people like to claim that they are not transphobic. I think a lot of society builds them and produces them in that way, where people are transphobic without even realizing it. Just like people are racist without even realizing it. Systemic racism, you know?
Then why not ask people to give up ketchup for the trans people in their lives? Anyone who's willing to do it is probably more likely to take you into their home than somebody who wouldn't be willing to give up ketchup for you. They clearly have a higher level of investment. I don't see how it makes them more politically useful to you, but if that's a line in the sand that you want to draw.
Well, this isn't just me. Like this was the social consciousness that like I didn't get to pick this move, like this whole like Hogwarts controversy. Obviously, a lot of like the trans community as like a social consciousness picked it itself. You know what I mean?
Well,
no individual person picked it.
The trans community picks lots of dumb stuff collectively, but we're all to an extent responsible for contributing, right? Especially as somebody with a public, persona like myself. My words carry more weight than any individual person on social media. There are trans people like Jesse Gender whose words do as well. Maybe more direct blame can be levied at those with larger audiences. The way social media works, it's all kind of abstracted. But all the same, I don't think a person is less of an ally if they're playing Hogwarts Legacy. It's just, why tie someone's perceived value to you to a politically ineffective action?
Well, do you honestly think that like somebody who because I don't know, just from a lot of my personal experiences, and I don't necessarily want to like go on like the anecdotal level, but I used to be like a really heavy, like a really good ally. In fact, we've actually talked before a really long time ago before I even transitioned. Do you know that?
Oh, no, I didn't. So I suppose that's a compliment to you then. Congratulations.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Um, but yeah, so I I got super duper invested in like a whole bunch of trans issues, and it helped me crack my egg. But like, it was that level of investment. It was that level of like, I'm willing to give up this, give up that. Just like I was talking about how for like a lot of Black people and having a Black space, it's not necessarily about like any greater pull towards like a societal norm. It's about testing the waters. Hey, can we get this? Is this something that we can ask from other people? Is this a sacrifice they are willing to make? And in terms of buying a $60 game, I don't think that's necessarily a hard ask for people.
But it doesn't, we shouldn't be asking people to make arbitrary sacrifices for no reason other than to test their devotion to a demographic.
Why not?
Because that's stupid and it'll lose you allies. It doesn't win you anything.
Well, no, okay. It doesn't. Okay. Do you remember or do you know about those Nigerian prince scams?
Yes.
Did you know? Like a lot of people think it's really dumb. You know what I mean? Like you get that text or that call. It's like, hey, I'm a prince from Nigeria. I need you to transfer me money. Do you know why they still do that, even though everyone knows it's stupid?
Because they don't want to waste their time with people who are smart enough to kind of see through their scams. They only want the stupidest people. Otherwise, they would waste all their time half-words baiting people who fall for the initial scam wave, but give up as soon as they see the credit card info.
Exactly. So do you think as hurting as the trans community is right now, do you think we have the ability to leverage tepid support versus necessary needed support from our allies?
So I'm not letting you get away with this comparison. It's not tepid versus needed. You're trying to justify what I think is provably a politically ineffective action for no reason other than to demonstrate that they're willing to do something politically ineffective to show they like trans people. This doesn't help you in any way. It doesn't make your life any better. It makes it harder. The more people publicly disagree with trans people, the more likely you are to have to experience additional legal and social consequences in your future. This gets harder for you the fewer people agree with you. So we should do the most politically effective thing. Damn the feelings. I don't care what any trans person says. If they're telling me to do something politically ineffective, then screw them. If they're not smart enough to understand, and to be fair, the average person on social media doesn't think about politics anywhere near as much as I do. Of course, it's my job. So I'm not going to fault every single individual member of a community for not instantly arriving at what I consider to be the most determinative political strategy, the most effective way forward. But man, it is very, very frustrating. And you seem to be you're not even disagreeing on the effectiveness. You're principally in favor of doing something ineffective if trans people want you to. And I just can't buy that. I will not buy that. If that makes me a tepid ally, I disagree, but I would much rather be a tepid ally. And I think, frankly, if tepid means politically effective, then tepid allies are what the trans community needs and deserves.
Well, I guess, did you, I don't want to take up like all your time today. How much longer do you have to debate?
You don't need to worry about that. I'll let you know if I have to get to something else.
Okay. Well, yeah, no, I just, is it possible that I can ask for like a poll in your chat? I don't know. I'm just curious.
You can, though they have a bias.
Doesn't mean you'll do it.
What do you want to know from them?
Well, I just generally want to know, like for trans people, if you can just get the trans people in your community, and I'm sure the cis people will not brigade your trans only viewers poll. Ask them, would you feel more comfortable or less comfortable around somebody who bought and is playing the transphobic game?
All right. Well, the mods will work on that.
Yeah. Will you do that, cis people? You won't brigade the chat, right? Or am I being super naive?
The community is like majority trans anyway, so. Or at least the chat tends to be like 50-50. Keep in mind, though, that I don't really care about the individual comfiness of any individual trans person, right? If their discomfort is part of a more broadly effective political strategy, then I think that's fine.
Right. So yeah, again, and you know, and I'm sorry to say this to you. I know that you think that you are a great trans ally, and you know, for the most part, you're a way better ally to trans people than the average person. Even, you know what I mean? Not even talking about like certain other people.
I
Like
don't really
you,
think of myself as a trans ally, for what it's worth. I really don't care about trans people any more than I do any other group of people. Trans people are the most targeted right now, and that's unfortunate, and it deserves special attention. But all of this is part of what I broadly consider to be ethical. If my morals trended a different direction, then I would be as unambivalently anti-trans as I am unambivalently pro-trans now. But I don't think of myself as like, I'm doing this for trans people. If I think something's ethical, I want it because I want it.
oh, this is cutting too close to home. I'm about to cry. Sorry. Um, oh my God, I can't believe this. This has nothing to do with you, but you said something very similar to what my brother told me the other day. Um, so my mom, she was basically saying everyone at your work is lying to you. They like how you go to work in makeup, disgusting. And that really got to me. And I told, because I work with my brother. My brother's at my work, and he knows that's not how they think there. Like my work, it like they respect me and they love me there. But my brother wasn't willing to defend me. I'm sorry. Okay. And I talked to my brother about it. It's like, hey, why aren't you willing to even say anything about this? And he told me, I respect your identity, but this is your battle, not mine.
Do you think that's what I said?
Huh?
Do you think that in any way resembles what I said?
Well, no, it doesn't. It just shows me that this is my battle. This is our battle as a trans community. You know what I
No,
mean?
it's the opposite. Support for the rights of trans people are just a component of a broadly ethical set of behaviors. But I don't have to be a trans ally to do that, because being an ally suggests that there's some kind of like group separation going on here. It's about ethical and unethical behavior. What's happening to the trans community is unethical. Their freedom is ethical. It's as simple as that. Trans issues come up a lot, but what you're doing, and I think you're doing this to an extent that it's hurting you, is you are treating this like a social space with the demands and expectations of one. I'll tolerate unreasonable demands from a friend, but I'm not friends with the trans community. They're just a group of people that I want to see political success for.
Right. Like, this is I understand like your position on that, and I would expect like a lot of just decent people to have that same position. You know what I mean? This isn't necessarily because you're attached to the trans community. This is just because you generally feel that you're a good person. You know what I mean?
Well, I would hope so.
Right, but like even if we had like zero support, you know what I mean, which we had for a very long time, you know what I mean, especially like back in like the 70s and the 60s, and even before then, we still need like strong like people to stick by us. Like we need people to hold the line. Do you think that it's okay, let me ask you a question. Do you
It sounds
you
like what you're
prefer
looking
quantity
for.
over quality, correct?
That's very vague. Are we talking about Cheez-Its or a steak dinner, or?
Steak dinners.
I want quantity and quality.
I mean, like I want quality. I don't necessarily care about like quantity.
If what you're talking about is political support, then that approach of yours leads to very bad directions. You don't need 5 dedicated allies. What you need is 50 million lukewarm allies whose support of trans people is just strong enough to motivate who they vote for and who they vote against. It doesn't need to be any stronger than that.
That depends on how good those allies, those 5 allies are. A single person can change the world, Vaush.
Nobody can change the world on your own. You need a large group of political support. And it doesn't really matter how dedicated that support is, as long as it's significant enough to make a systemic change. I mean, Christ, back when the civil rights movement was passed, which did affect the lives of so many people, I'd be willing to bet the average pro-civil rights person in the States was tentative and lukewarm about it. But it was sure a hell of a lot better that they had so many lukewarm people than they had perhaps 10 or 15 dedicated activists, or even 15,000. You need large numbers of people.
I mean, possibly that, like, yeah, like if you're talking like a certain broad perspective, like I would much rather have that tepid support than no support at all. But at the same time, I'm not necessarily looking for that tepid support. I'm looking for people who can like be there by my side, the people that will, like, if I call them, will be able to come over and like comfort me and hug me and let me know that everything's okay, that they could like take me if they need to take me.
And it sounds to
you
me
don't necessarily get that from tepid support.
You're talking about friends. I'm talking about political support. Mm-hmm. Political allies aren't your friends. They'll never know who you are. They won't know your face or your name. They'll never show up when you need them because they don't know who you are. You should hold these standards for your friends. Not for like the broader base of political support trans people need. Trans people don't need individual friends. That doesn't do anything.
Well, yeah, like the metric that we used to test to see what these allies were willing to do was not spend $60, and we can't even get them to do that.
Yeah, it was a stupid metric. And also, you're asking that of an online community full of strangers. Like, you're tossing that out into the void. Did you think all the people in the void were friends interpersonally to people in the trans community?
No, trust me, we get it. We know.
No, you don't know. What you're thinking right now is that this is their failure, that they failed to live up to your standards. It's wrong. You failed to set good standards. What you imagine is that you want from your political allies a base of support comparable to that of a friend. But you're never going to get that. That's not real. That's not real. The left isn't a social group. The left is a political movement. Sometimes. On its good days.
Yeah, on its good days. Well, I mean, I don't necessarily agree with that. Like, the whole, like, I would say like COVID was a good metric for like seeing what people will do and what people will tolerate not to harm total strangers. You know what I mean? And that was like wearing a mask, was it not?
Sure, but that was part of a virological phenomena. I mean, that was not a social expectation. That was an interpersonal medical expectation, reinforced by the power of the state with mask mandates. I don't think they're comparable, and I don't know why you would care so much about whether or not some random people online play Hogwarts Legacy. So should a person who is pro-trans but has no trans friends not play Hogwarts Legacy because he is to be abstractly someone who would take you in if you were homeless, even though he's never met you? I mean, how does that standard work?
He. Why do you say he? Why couldn't it be a woman or a non-binary person?
It could be a woman or a non-binary person. The non-binary people are trans. So
I'm just teasing you.
So why should they hold to that standard?
Well, like, again, how do I say this? I am part of the age group of people where you know what, actually, I'm going to entirely avoid talking about COVID on your stream because I know that could get you in trouble. So I apologize.
It's fine. They've loosened stuff a bit, but it's the dicey and YouTube guidelines.
Right. Just to let Every YouTube, Vaush is not. He does not think COVID's a conspiracy.
Thank you.
Don't ban the stream. But yeah, like, okay, we can see it as like something that's like an unreasonable ask. But I think if it's an unreasonable ask, it just shows that like it almost necessarily proves my point more. I would perceive if we can't even do something as much as this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but
then that shows that we really are as like super small. And I hate to have this.
You were large enough to be name dropped and defended by the President of the United States of America when he was running against Donald Trump in 2020. The trans community has a broader base of support than you think. The entirety of the liberal left in this country is some varying flavor of pro-trans. You are arbitrarily marking the line of support at something that seems to be a better fit for what you might ask a friend to do or not do. It like, you can't blame other people or yourself for, well, you can blame yourself, actually. You certainly can't blame other people if you set an unreasonable standard that doesn't make any sense and that standard isn't met. Like, why would anyone have listened to it?
Well, again, yeah, like the whole point of it being like an unreasonable standard, because again, like I almost fully agree with you that the idea that like trying to boycott this game is like, it was never, it functionally cannot work. You obviously agree with that. But again, that was not the point. The point was never to be like, let's ban this game. The point was, let's see who is able to do this one small gesture for us.
Who cares?
Again, like you could call it like a virtue signal.
Yeah,
you know,
I am calling it that, but who cares? If it's a virtue signal and it doesn't have any outcome, or in this case has a negative outcome, like, who cares? Like, you don't have a right to impose unreasonable standards on others, not defend them, and then get frustrated when they don't follow them. You're essentially just admitting that the only purpose this is happening, the only reason you're holding this line, is so you have like an arbitrary, like, it's almost, with respect, like abusive behavior interpersonally, where you're not sure of other people's loyalty to you, so you make like little tests to put in their way to like see if they're willing to deal with inconvenience to keep with you. Like, it's a sign of insecurity at the very least. And I don't think
very much insecurity.
I don't.
Do you blame trans people for being insecure?
Yes, you're adults.
Go ahead.
Keep those decisions to the interpersonal, but especially if the boycott stuff is ineffective. Like, don't you think you're unnecessarily worsening your own life by tying perceived public support for trans people to whether or not they were willing or unwilling to buy Hogwarts Legacy? I mean, do you even have any numbers on which members of the left-leaning community even bought it? Where is your disappointment aimed? The boycott failed, sure, but that's because it was impossible. Do you know who's failed here? You said, and I remember multiple times now, they couldn't even do this for us. Who's they? Who's bought Hogwarts Legacy who you were expecting not to? I haven't bought it. Hassan ended up not buying it after getting bullied out of it. He was going to do a giant pro-trans charity stream. Who else? You're creating a negative situation in your head, an unreasonable ask and an imagined answer, all to justify the feeling that you have, the feeling you started with that you're looking to reinforce, a negative perception of the state of things. But you don't need to make anything up to feel that way. Life is shit enough as it is. Why add to it?
Well, I would say like as a social conscious, like no one individual. When I told you, I'm talking about the social consciousness. I'm talking necessarily about like the Western world and how it views trans people currently. And yeah, I noticed somebody in your chat, they brought up the concept of like force the vote. You know what I mean? And you could say that this is something very similar to force the vote. You know what I mean? I would disagree in the sense that like force the vote like, because I'm not a what do they call themselves? Like patriotic socialists. I'm not one of those, so I don't care about reproducing that outcome. But if you were part of like the force the vote, whatever that's, if you were part of that thing, then you saw who was like gonna be your quote unquote allies in that fight. You know what I mean? They were able to like group up together, and it didn't mean much because oftentimes like fascist ideologies fall apart. But oh, that was mean of me. Sorry. Okay,
Do
yeah.
you know? Can you name
Go
a
ahead.
person for me
Mhm.
who bought Hogwarts Legacy who you didn't want to buy it?
Who I didn't want to buy it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, I have a personal friend who I like saw that bought it. I'm like, ugh, that's kind of eh. Again, I'm not talking about like I personally don't necessarily care if you bought it or not. I just am gonna feel more comfortable with the people who didn't buy it.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Then who are you uncomfortable with? There's a friend.
Mhm.
Who else? Earlier, you were talking about this as evidence that the trans community didn't have much power. Well, if you agree that the boycott was doomed to fail to begin with, the only power you could be referring to here is the ability to keep people on the left from buying the game. So who on the left has bought it? Because you have a negative attitude towards the outcomes of this arbitrary gatekeep. But I don't know if you could point to a single person in the online community who has bought it despite your wishes.
I mean, this isn't like strictly against the left in and of itself, right? Like, I wouldn't want anyone to necessarily buy this game, not specifically the left.
But
You
you
know, I'm not
said
like harping on you. Go ahead.
you said the boycott was doomed.
Mhm.
So it sounds to me then, so what is this? You're sad because you set a standard that you acknowledge is impossible and it doesn't come true? Obviously, the game was going to sell well. It seems to me like a lot of this frustration is fabricated. Like you wanted to project a negative assessment of the online leftist community's favorability towards trans people onto a situation where you and nobody can get the numbers on who actually bought it. We don't know interpersonally.
Mhm. Go ahead.
No, that's it. I don't
Oh,
understand how you can justify your negative perception of this.
well, this again, like I'm I like tepid support. I do. Like it's necessary sometimes, you
Whose
know?
support is
And
tepid?
huh?
Whose support is tepid? Tepid, by your definition here, is buying the game. Who's bought the game?
I mean, a lot of people have bought that's I don't think that necessarily addresses my point. My point is that socially this was a failure. So that would mean that I'm talking about the social consciousness in and of itself has failed to meet up to this like standard that trans people need to not only survive but flourish.
But
Um,
you said that it was impossible. Like the boycott was always going to fail. You acknowledge that. So you're upset because a guaranteed failure turned out to be a failure?
well, I thought it was gonna fail because like I know the world we live in and I know how like a lot of it is transphobic. You know what I mean? Again, if we lived in a world where like the Harry Potter game immediately failed, like no one bought it, I would be shocked beyond all belief. Like you would be too, wouldn't you?
I would be shocked because the world doesn't work that way. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
again, like the entire right wing was pissed off with Nike and their sales only went up. Boycotts don't work. Like institutionally, boycotts don't work.
Well,
So
that's not necessarily true. They do work on like local levels.
on local levels, yes, yes. On local levels, on stuff that has like a material action that can be overtaken, like how strikes don't work on YouTube, but they can work at a factory. You know, there has to be a level of localization for it to be functional. But this is a digitally distributed video game. So obviously that wasn't going to fly. If you acknowledge that this kind of boycott is functionally impossible, the metric for success that was set was not achievable, why then would you be disappointed in an outcome of failure? It was the only possible outcome.
why I'm I'm not necessarily like you can't really necessarily I guess you can be necessarily disappointed about like the inevitable. It sucks that the world is the way it is, and it sucks that trans people have to be like so afraid.
We're
But a
not
lot
talking about
again, like
trans people. This is just the nature of boycotts. Like, it doesn't matter. It could have been trans people, cis people, white people, black people, men, women. It doesn't matter. This kind of boycott ain't going to work. Never has. Never, not once. So, again, it seems like you had a negative perception of how this rolled out when it comes to tepid support for the trans community. But the only outcome we got was the only one we could have gotten. There was one possible outcome, and it happened. So why the disappointment? I mean, it doesn't even have anything to do with trans people. You might as well get mad at entropy. Drop a ball and get disappointed if it hits the ground.
well, that goes into like a whole bunch of like different like ideological. We won't even touch upon that. Like, we would be here all night if we talked about my disdain for reality in and of itself. But again, like, okay, how do I say this? So let's say I have a group of people, right? I'm a single individual person. I can only offer so much support to other people. You know what I'm trying to say? Let's say I have like a group of 100 people, and 90 of them bought the game and 10 of them didn't buy the game. I know that I could go to those 10 people and potentially like convince them, hey, do you think you'd be able to like do other things for me, or do you think you'd be able to do other things that would actually help our like community flourish? You know, can you be like an ally, like a really powerful ally?
Was that phrased as a question?
I guess not. I apologize. But that's just how I personally feel.
Then why be upset about like a situation you're creating in your head?
Oh no, I'm not necessarily upset. I just have limited time, limited energy. I don't necessarily want to spend my energy um like well, I guess I'm spending my energy talking with you, but this is fun for us. We're having fun, right?
I always have fun talking to people I disagree with. But I still
Sure.
want to know if all of this is about a virtue signal by your own admission, and you can't even describe any way in which the outcome of this virtue signal was negative by your standard. What's the concern with my approach? The idea this whole thing was retarded, politically ineffective, destructive, harmful to you, by the way, not to me. I'm not trans. My position here, it seems, is unchallenged, because what you're talking about is the abstract likelihood of a person who bought the game being more or less transpositive, to which the answer is, I don't know. I don't know if that's true or not. Probably. There were some people on the left who didn't get it. Most people on the left kind of don't like Harry Potter that much anymore. Some people on the right like it because they got into it because of the culture war. I think a lot of people who like Harry Potter are just middle-of-the-road centrist people. They're not going online to see the discourse. They don't know anything about... They may have heard J.K. Rowling is transphobic, but I don't think they're going to make that connection in their head. Like, oh, well, therefore, by buying this game, I'm politically supporting transphobia. That's not like a normal thing for people to politically connect. So what? You go up to 10 people, 5 have bought it, 5 haven't, and you ask them to take you in for a night when you're homeless. What are their answers going to be? You don't know. I don't know. Are the 5 people who bought it centrists? Are they nice people? Are they young? Are they old? The people who didn't buy it, did they not buy it because they're rural conservatives? I just don't understand what the relationship is here. I don't know what the point is in thinking about this.
All right. I don't want to. I don't want to accuse you of like being a little obtuse, but we even saw like in your own chat, like trans people were actually more comfortable with people who didn't buy the game than people who did. But actually, fun fact, I was actually, because I'm trans right now, but I actually never was into Harry Potter whatsoever, even as a kid, which I dodged a bullet, I think, my cousin was into black magic and he ruined Harry Potter for me.
The feelings of my chat are not relevant to me. I mean, their feelings on this issue, it was a choice between would they feel more or less comfortable with somebody if they knew they were playing Hogwarts Legacy, and 3-1 they said less comfortable. Leaving aside the fact that it's a binary option, which means, like, what if they feel the same level of comfort? The fact remains that we're assessing their feelings here. Also, a lot of the people in my chat are always online, too. Their perception of Harry Potter, Hogwarts Legacy is purely a culture war artifact. They couldn't even begin to understand the mind of the normie, of the griller. They have no idea. It's beyond them. It's beyond their comprehension.
Yeah, trust me, a lot of trans people are quote unquote online. Like even like trans when you become trans, or I'm not saying you will become trans, even though maybe you do have an egg, I don't know. But trans people, that's a lot of like we spend a lot of our time online because a lot like it's really hard to find local trans people, especially in Las Vegas. But when I do find local Las Vegas trans people, guess what? They're always like online socialists.
Yeah, well, I guess it really is a social epidemic. Really though, do you understand what I'm saying when I say that, like, there's not really an argument for the imposition of this boycott on any level? I mean, it doesn't seem to serve well as a virtue signal because you can't even identify any people who have failed you in that respect. And politically it was ineffective. Why should we do politically ineffective things?
Well, I guess it depends on like your perspective, if it was politically effective or not. Like depending on like how a person wants to engage with their politics. If you are super tied up into into a government's form of politics or like electoralism, then yes, of course, you're going to find it ineffective. A lot of things on the left would be perceived as ineffective, even though we technically hold these values to be true in our hearts.
Who cares what's in the heart of leftists? If they don't spread their ideology, then it'll die in their hearts too.
Well, right, but sometimes, like I said earlier, sometimes death is preferable towards living certain forms of existence.
But the certain forms of existence we're talking about here is politically efficacious strategy. I think we can survive it.
Well, do you believe? Well, do you believe? Can there be billionaires in a socialist world?
I don't see what the relationship is here.
I'm just testing the like what you were talking about earlier, like our again survive, like your form of survival leftism, our ability to survive. I've heard you talked about this the other day. You were talking about how it would actually behoove leftists to get a billionaire on their side, even though they have a disposition to not like billionaires.
Yes, getting funding would probably help quite a lot. It is the two preconditions of socialism, which are decommodification and democratic control of the means of production, would preclude anyone being able to be a billionaire so long as the decommodification is total. If there are any worker cooperatives left that are not fully decommodified, it would be hypothetically possible to be a billionaire if you could somehow amass an enormous amount of wealth to be distributed fairly in one company, but it's not likely to happen.
Sure. Well, I see a lot of people, they're getting a little bored about repetition, I guess. And it seems like we are kind of going in circles here. We really don't have much else to say about each other.
You don't need to worry about chat. That's my job. Do you really think that political efficaciousness would be intolerable for us? Like we would rather like all die in a death camp than be politically effective?
Well, it depends on what we have to do for our political effectiveness. Like again, like I bring up that debate bro talking point of forcing women to be broodmare. You know, for some people that would be, you know, you'd be allowing the human race to survive to eventually reach socialism, but you would be doing something horrendous to do it.
Sure, but what we're talking about here in this context is just not making a video game trend for months and then publicly announce the trans community is very invested in boycotting a game that it's impossible to boycott.
Right,
Therefore
but that
painting a
also will
target.
not lead to death camps, Vaush.
No, but it puts us one tiny step closer. Every bit of public support lost makes it easier for those things to happen.
It is a tiny step, and you know, like, we'll just if you can do one more poll to end this on. I know I don't want to step out of my line, just asking you to perform your chat, but I would love to see that previous poll that I suggested earlier, but instead we'll add like I don't care to the mix for trans people. Like, are you comfortable, less comfortable, or you just don't care?
But even if their comfort isn't of issue to me, even if that was the case, I don't care if trans people would be hypothetically uncomfortable in the company of people online who they haven't met. Doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, well, it does matter to me. I like spreading love.
No, it's not about spreading love. You're asking people who have never met you to follow conditions for being a friend with you. That's not love. Frankly, I think it's entitlement. I think you're entitled to demand politically efficacious behavior from people in a political space, but not to make you comfortable. It's not your group chat. It's an entire movement. I'm not comfortable in the online left. They give me tons of shit.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think people should be comfortable in political spaces for the most part. Comfort tends to breed lethargy. It makes people complacent.
I guess in a way, yeah, that is true. But at the same time, everything is political. So if you don't have any form of comfort in your politics, or literally every single social transaction we do, everything social reproduction, like I was talking about earlier, is a form of politics. You can't escape politics no matter what. Even if you say that you're oh, I don't engage in politics. Yes, you do. Everybody does. It's impossible to escape it. And I like to spread love. Like, I like to, if people need me to be there for them, if because I didn't say, hey, don't buy this game on my behalf. Other people, this social consciousness developed that, and I'm showing solidarity with the trans community.
What does this have to do with spreading love? You're not indicating solidarity with anyone else. You're just asking random people who you don't know to not buy a game and then getting upset when the game does well anyway, even though it was always going to do well. I mean, how you said it was a virtue signal to prove allegiance to the trans community. What does this have to do with love?
Well, okay, I wouldn't use the term like allegiance.
Subservience?
Well, no, like well, this is, I don't know. That's a little how would you phrase that in a more like positive or optimistic way?
I wouldn't. You literally said that you want them to do a politically ineffective virtue signal to prove their loyalty to the trans community. I think it deserves a negative term. You're not testing solidarity because solidarity is action oriented. It's towards positive action. You wouldn't say you have solidarity in the trans community because a bunch of trans people, like, who are full of self-hate, egged you on to make transphobic posts or to clock a bunch of women on Twitter, right? Like, that's not solidarity. That's just getting along with a bunch of trans women who are making you do something dumb. So I think what we're talking about here ultimately is like compliance. If it's not being done for a reason, the only reason you're offering is because I told you to, then yeah.
Well, I feel like the compliance is on the other foot, in all honesty. I feel like if this has become like too much for like trans people to ask, that like this our liberation to be important to people, and that we need to get back in line and learn when our advocacy should be done for us or not.
That's true, yes. You have to have good asks.
Well, so why don't you say that then? Why don't you tell trans people to get back in line?
I tell trans people to shut up all the time, like constantly. That's like 20% of my stream at least. Yeah, like being a member of a minority group doesn't mean you get to just make random demands. Well, like, that doesn't make any sense. You can make random demands of your friends and your mom. Well, maybe not your mom, because she sounds like a bitch, but the conceptual mom.
Thank you.
But like this has nothing to do with broader like if some trans woman was like, oh, okay, well today we're going to do this discourse, and it's like, you're actually not an ally to trans people if you don't like spins wheel on a wall, if you don't like donate to me on PayPal or whatever. Look, these cis people couldn't even spare me $20 to help me get by. Some allies we have, like, you're just testing subservience at this point. Like you're not demanding any political effectiveness, you're demanding the slavish loyalty that people show just random e-girls. Political cause be damned.
Well, if trans people had more simps, this world would be a better place, Vaush.
Not if the simps are being told to do politically ineffective stuff.
Yeah. Anyway, I think we've probably spun our wheels long enough. We can end this conversation. That's fine.
All right. Well, I enjoyed having you on, and I hope you're going to have a wonderful day.
You as well. Thank you for having me on. And I hope I didn't I hope I don't leave like, I hope you don't think I'm like a bad person or anything like that. And also love you all in the chat, especially you, Jesse, and Beyonce Fords, and Demon Mama, if you happen to be there. Love you too.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye. All right, we did it. We had a conversation. I hope you all enjoyed the opportunity for me to roleplay as a super cool, politically disaffected, consistent practicer of my ethics who doesn't care about you, I just care about the results. I hope you all like that. I love doing that bit, because it is how I feel, but I like doing the bit anyway, and now we all got to watch me do that bit. It's a true bit, but it is my bit. Still a bit. You were so quiet. Do you think it would have been appropriate to yell at any point during that? Can we watch? Can we play Hogwarts Legacy now? True. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Is being a therapist for these people actually fun? All politics is therapy. I'm sorry to say. It's not actually any any real boundary there. Most conservatives are basically just like one really bad relationship with their father talk, away from breaking down to tears and walking to the ocean anyway. So it's fucking, I don't know. Do you think you were too harsh on her? I don't think I was harsh at all. Like, at all.